Today we have 3 technique reviews. So first up we have Charlie. Charlie has got a deadlift here. This looks like it's, just turn the volume down on that. So it looks like what we've got 100. Right, next up we have, we'll go with Colby. So just turn that down again. So I'm assuming it's not the knee raises, no, it's the bench that we're looking at. So we have got 160, about 360 kilos or 360 pounds ish on here. So first thing is no wrist straps, no elbow sleeves, all good from that perspective. Spotter on either side, very sensible approach to take. We've got flat heels on the floor. Okay, so that's tough for a single. Right, so a few things here that we can address. So the first one is just the stability. So you'll see as you unrack the bar, your feet and knees are doing all sorts of weird things until you actually get in position, even to the point of where you actually start the rep. If you watch your foot and your knee, that was terrible, foot and your knee as you start the rep, they're both jiggling about before you even start to move. The next thing is, if we go back just a split second, just before you start, you kind of start to raise your hips and your fingers are still moving on the bar. Just minute things, but it's trying to keep everything as static as possible apart from the things that are moving. So you come down, you start to come down nice and controlled. As you do, your head is starting to come off the bench. I would suggest probably trying to keep your head planted, so that you're in the same position for every rep, because I'd imagine what happens is as the weight gets heavier, your head comes more and more off the bench, sort of like a reflex you can see there, to try and make it easier. It's nice and controlled until about here, where you basically then just drop the bar to try and bounce it. So it's not too bad. When you reach your sticking point here, you can see your hips are trying to drive up and you're getting stuck at this point of the press. So you're in a really good position there of your elbows under your wrists, which is fantastic. Your elbows, you see, they've kind of flared out to get back into that position, and then the bar slows down. You then manage to get it to re-accelerate right towards the top there. So as far as benching goes, pretty good. There are obviously things you can look to improve. So for example, this position here of your hips already being high, what your hips becoming high as you press, what I would suggest is when you actually start benching to have your knees below your hips. So what that might mean for you is you might have to have your knees wider and your feet out here in a wider position, so you're in a stable base. The next thing is, so you've ended up in an arched position when you actually press. Nothing wrong with that at all. What I would suggest though is doing that intentionally and proactively rather than reactively. So do it before you actually initiate the press rather than waiting until the press happens to do it. And then in terms of accessory work for you, so your weakness, so most people would say your weakness is where it slows down. So they would say your weakness is there, but that's not your weakness, because from this position here you manage to start to get it to move again. Where you are weakest is just before that point here. So this point here is where all of the acceleration stops. So you can see how many frames I can skip and the bar barely moves, whereas it's moving, stop. So this right here is where you're weakest. So for you, what I would suggest is that's a case of the front of your shoulders being the weakness. So typically speaking, if you're failing right off the chest, for most people it tends to be that it's a pec weakness. If you're failing in like the mid-range, so if your weak point is around the mid-range, it tends to be your front delts that are the weakness. And if you're failing right at the top, which is very unlikely, then it tends to be your triceps. So it'll be more front dot work. I'll be looking to hammer to really make the most of it. And then the reason why I say that this is unlikely to be your triceps is because you're in a position where triceps now are the limiting factor and you manage to get the bar moving again, so the bar actually accelerates towards the top, which suggests that the triceps are not the weak point in that. So overall, pretty good. I'd include more front delt stuff, so like some raises. I love me some front raises. Whether you do that dumbbell, barbell, easy bar, cable, whatever, doesn't matter. What you can even do is lying back on a bench and then do front raises in that position. You might find that helpful. And finally, for today's edition, we have Ian. I'll preemptively mute this. So, looks like we've got farmers. Don't know if it's going to be just farmers deadlift or farmers walk. Really nice position for the pickup. Not bad for the moving. Obviously, it's not a very long distance, so you don't really have time to get from the short strides into a longer stride. Now, in terms of your actual position, you're in a good place here. So armpit is over the bar, back's nice and neutral, perfectly fine. With it being a farmer's, obviously it's quite a high pickup, so it's more like a semi-squat. Your foot position, feet are nice and close together, which is what we tend to want for farmers. With farmers, there are two main techniques you have with your foot stance. So one is a staggered stance and the other is feet together. That's going to vary based on what you prefer, essentially, and what you try. Hand position on the handles, again, you have three different schools of thought. So you have front of the handle, and then back of the handle. Depending on what it is you're looking for out of the farmers would change what grip you want to do. What I would suggest for strongman specific stuff is MST systems, so modified strongman training systems. Shin German. I don't know if I'm saying surname wrong. I would look to for strongman specific stuff, to be honest. Although I know some stuff about strongman, my forte is more in powerlifting. Basically, looks pretty good from here. You get into a decent position, and then from there it's a case of walking forwards. Now with the handles, the reason I say about the different positions is if you are gripping at the back of the handle there, when you lift it up it's going to be tilted forwards, which then means that actually the inertia of moving forwards with it is going to be slightly easier. When you have the handles with your hands at the front, it means it will be tilting backwards. But what that means is it will be tilting backwards. Then when you stand up, the inertia of you moving forwards is going to rock the handles forwards. So as you go forwards, then it's going to kind of drag you forwards. And then you have the middle, which is a more moderate approach. So generally speaking, if it's a heavier weight, you're probably going to go with in the middle, because then it's going to be smaller steps. The one like small constructive bit of criticism I could go with is your foot stance here. So with your feet rotated out, it means that when you first step, you're going to potentially lose your balance a little bit. What you might find better is to have both feet facing forward and the gap between them fairly small. This is not bad by any means, but if you have really wide feet when you're doing farmers or anything heavy, as soon as you take that first step, all of your weight is going to be distributed on one side. If that's a broad base, that's going to make you very unstable. If you've got a narrower base and you're just going step, you're going to be much more stable laterally, so left to right. So if we watch you as you go, you can see there is that first few steps, because your feet are wider, you are rotating a little bit from side to side, and you do correct it. So you step to the middle there, which is the right thing to do. And then the next thing should be to step this foot into the middle, but you don't. It looks like you step that foot just to back in line with it. And then after that, then you go middle, 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 and you can start to pick up the speed. And what this looks like, either it's right on the limits of your grip and it's falling out, or it's fairly light for you. I'd say it's probably fairly light for you from looking at this. And then spin around, go to the other side. Do we go to the other side? No, that's the end of the video. So that's it, man. Not bad at all. Like I say, for the strongman stuff, I would probably go to MST. He's just better at this kind of stuff. Right, if you want yours doing, then you have to take part in 14strong.com, because that's where I do these technique reviews. I will upload the next one of these next time I do it. The goal plans to just do one of these a week, because I obviously need to do this for my athletes, do these in much more detail for them. If you want some help, either go to ascperformance.com, 14strong.com, getstrongfeelawesome.com, whichever one you want. Take care, guys.